Hello, welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by Zach Blostein. How's my hello? Is it gregarious and upbeat?
Hello.
Hello, nice to see everyone. We're covering a team that's getting commitments all of a sudden. It's fun again. Hello. Buyer Sinone, Zach, sponsored by.
The Turner Group.
It's been a fun 2 days.
It has. Bye. Sorry.
There we go. Play it right. Come
Sometimes
on.
I forget.
Yeah, I know. It's really difficult, the parameters of the game. All right, we're going to get into it. FSU has landed multiple commitments, including a pretty big one of the best portal prospects on the market. Before we get into that, a shout out to our sponsors. Buyer Sinone is sponsored by
The Turner Group.
There you go, Zach. You're getting it. If you're looking to buy or sell a home in the state of Florida, don't Sinone on the process just because it can be daunting. Go ahead, reach out to the Turner Group, Colin, Amy Turner, FSU grads. Wonderful, lovely people, work really hard, well connected throughout the state to be able to help you with the venture of buying or selling a home. I know this time of year is really stressful, so that might not be on everyone's radar. But as you get into January and things start to settle down a little bit, if you've been kind of in the on the bubble there, that's what we would suggest for you to go to. And they can help you get literally where you want to go. And if you're doing a little procrastinating, you're looking for a slightly less high venture Christmas present. If you want to buy your significant other house, go for it. That'd be pretty cool. But if you're looking for something more in like the $45, $50 range, and you got a whiskey lover in your family, I would recommend Chattanooga Whiskey, crushing it in the craft distillery game. Legitimately a fantastic product with craft distilling. Their 111 proof whiskey is one of the best values out there. Their entry level bourbon is really nice. It's going to be good in mixers and friendly for someone just getting into it. Their rye, fantastic as well. It's a bourbon lover's rye, so I would recommend any three of those. You can find them throughout the state of Florida, and they have all sorts of experimental stuff as well. If you want to try and do something a little bit more robust or different, unique out there. So thank you to both of our sponsors. They've been awesome this year. We appreciate having them aboard and appreciate you guys for giving them a try as well. All right, Zach, let's get into it here. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time because we got holiday stuff we're trying to finish up here on the website and be done for the next few days. But FSU had some stuff that we feel like we honestly just had to get to because it's been a bit of a wave of commitments in the transfer portal. The biggest, the most high profile one is where we'll start off, and that's Duce Robinson. He is a 4-star transfer wide receiver from USC, ranked as the number 5 prospect in the transfer portal this cycle. A legacy. His father's Dominic Robinson played at FSU in the early 2000s. So this is a huge one for Florida State. He's had over 300 yards each of the last 2 seasons, a former 5-star recruit. Yeah, man, this is huge for FSU, it feels like. Do you have any insights into like kind of the recruiting process and how FSU ended up landing one of the most coveted prospects in the transfer portal?
Yeah, well, when Duce Robinson entered the portal, obviously there's a lot of ties to Florida State just because of his dad playing for the Seminoles in the early 2000s, and I think FSU wasn't really involved in his high school recruiting process. Duce was a 5-star recruit back in the 2023 class, and was a really sought after player. And FSU at the time didn't have a ton of proof of concept. Obviously, that season was kind of where things shifted for Florida State on the field, but they never really gained much traction. And I just don't think there was a lot of mutual interest from him and his camp with Florida State at the time. Things have changed, and FSU does. Obviously, this recent season was what it was, but FSU does have proof of concept specifically with utilizing big receivers within their offense. New offense this season, but Gus Malzahn has had success with some bigger framed pass catchers, and that was a clear objective for Florida State this offseason. And Duce Robinson is the most talented addition of their entire portal class, most likely, and definitely on the offensive side of the football. He's a guy that's going to be an immediate starter, 6'6", 220 pounds, has had solid production his first 2 years. And USC is obviously a spot that has, seen some struggles as of late. So it's not like he was coming from a absolutely, loaded situation from a passing attack standpoint. I think Florida State and him, it's a pretty good fit just for what FSU wants to do offensively. And like I said, clear objective here. And I tweeted this out yesterday, and just looking at the additions that FSU's made both in the high school ranks and in the portal, along with what returns from their roster, they've got legit size. At the pass catching, both at tight end and receiver. Just to name a few: 6'7" JUCO wideout Jordan Scott, 6'6" Duce Robinson, 6'6" high school tight end signee Chase Lofton, 6'5" receiver signee Tariq Mallory, 6'4" returner Elijah Moore, 6'4" receiver signee Tayshawn Gelsey, and then the two returning tight ends, 6'4" Amari Williams and 6'4" Landon Thomas. So
reminds me of the mid 2000s Jacksonville Jaguars. I know it's a throwback there. Matt Jones, Reggie Williams, Ernest Wilford. Those were guys who were all like 6'3", 6'6" range, and they just did a lot of jump balls back then. So yeah, fun. It's a method that can work. Though we'll talk about it. You obviously need a little bit more diversity to the skill sets, I think, that you're still looking for in that room. But a clear objective indeed, Zach. You're right on that.
Yeah, and Duce is a big win, right? Like, Arizona State, that's where Duce, he played his high school football in Arizona, and Arizona State was the first school to host him on a visit during his portal process. Obviously, a playoff team, one of the top 4 seeds in the playoff this season. So like that's a program that theoretically should be big competition, but FSU was able to withstand that visit, get him in for a visit, late this past week, finished up this weekend. And yeah, I mean, we're able to close the deal. And I think, a huge kudos to Thomas Castellanos. He played a big role in this recruitment and in getting Duce to Tallahassee. I think, we had wrote an article earlier in the week about how Dominic Robinson, who obviously works for War Chant, talked about on one of their shows, how Duce and Castellanos had connected before the visit, and that Duce was a fan of Castellanos' game. They connect. He literally walks into Florida State's facility with Castellanos in his, travel party, basically with him and his family. And they're seen multiple times throughout the visit together. So clearly that was an objective for Castellanos to get one of the top pass catchers in the transfer portal to join him at Florida State. They get it done. So that's a big deal. But yeah, I mean, biggest transfer portal addition to date for Florida State. And, that's not to say there aren't other important ones that we'll get to here in a little bit.
What do you think of his game? Like, we know he's tall. Let's break that down for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, the size is the first thing that stands out, but I think how he moves at that size is, super impressive. I guess when you think of someone that's 6'6", 220, you're not thinking of a guy that's, moving smoothly. Usually when you have pass catchers at that size, they're kind of, I don't know, like not as fluid as you would like from a pass catching weapon. Watching him in his 2 years at USC, he is a guy that is kind of, has freaky skills at that size. And I think the Johnny Wilson comps are a little bit, low hanging fruit, but I think they're right. Johnny was a guy that impressed all of us very early on in his FSU career because he was 6'7" and, over 200 pounds, but moved like a guy that was much lighter and
240 pounds. We forget how big Johnny Wilson was. Like Duce Robinson's big at 220. Johnny Wilson was like 240.
Yeah, and he consistently beat like some of FSU's NFL draft picks, at defensive back in practices, and obviously that showed up in game settings for Johnny, and that's why he was drafted in the NFL. And Duce is obviously a little bit lighter, but moves just as well, and maybe even better. And I just think that if you can really unlock his game in a passing attack, which he should be the featured guy for Florida State this upcoming season, could be really fun to watch.
It's interesting, like where the Johnny Wilson comps can be. like it is low hanging fruit when you say, oh, 6'6", 220, whatever. Like they are built similarly, but much like Johnny Wilson was for FSU in 2022, like there's a vertical presence to him. This isn't just like you think 6'6" and just a jump ball specialist, and really like for Johnny and for Duce, like that's part of their game, but like I wouldn't say that's like a top strength. Like Duce Robinson's contested catch rate was, I think, mid 30 percentile or mid 30s. It was lower percentile. Part of that, they just throw the ball up there and they weren't always really good passes. Like that's when he was going to follow, was it Morgan Miller? Who was the USC quarterback that went to Louisville?
Miller Moss.
I coached a kid named Morgan Miller. I swear that went. Anyways, there was I didn't know if I bought into that because like just watching the way like there's just a lot of jump balls you just threw up there and they weren't necessarily super accurate, that you didn't put your wide receiver in a great shot is kind of how I looked at that. But regardless, that's only a part of Duce Robinson's game. What really stands out to me like as a strength for him is like how he's able to get vertically and move at his size. You mentioned Zach, but like Johnny Wilson averaged I think 20 yards or so a catch in 2022 and was like a top 10 receiver in yards per catch. Duce Robinson was very similar and actually a little bit better statistically his true freshman season. Do wonder why, like with his size and some of the athleticism, why the production isn't better. Like he's had 300 yards in each of the last 2 seasons. I think this past year, 5 touchdowns and like high 350, 360 yard range. I can't remember exactly, but in that range. And I'm not sure like what the next, like what he needs to smooth out other than maybe winning a few more of those contested catches. I just wonder how much he was featured, kind of going through some of the numbers and some of the target rates. Like it was fine, but he wasn't this guy who was targeted all the time. Another part that I think is part of his game that is worth talking about and that is comparable to Johnny Wilson, maybe why he wasn't getting featured a ton, is the blocking. Like the perimeter blocking and even just like watching him on backside of runs, like when it's not even coming his way, he's legitimately really good in that area and cares about that. And that's something that Johnny Wilson specialized in. And Johnny was bigger, right? He was 20 pounds heavier. And threw that weight around a little bit more, but you see Duce Robinson cares in that aspect. And, perimeter blocking was a major issue for Florida State this past season. And it's no surprise. Like if you follow along with Mike Norvell press conferences, if you watch the games, like it just was not a strength. And in fact, it was a weakness and something that Tim Harris talked about right away in his introductory press conference was playing without the ball in your hands and how important that's going to be. And we'll see, you have to live that life, but you add someone like Duce Robinson, and I'm not celebrating, like you're not getting him because of his blocking, but that is a reason to be excited about the addition. So and we'll get into with some of the other guys they've added, but that's a clear thing that they're trying to emphasize is guys who play hard without the ball in their hands and guys who care to protect their teammates, or at least that's what it looks like based on who they're adding. So I really like this get a lot. I think he had a 94 grade at 24/7 Sports. I gave him a 92, so like similar range. That's a guy who's going to play on Sundays, most likely. He'll be drafted for you. Automatically becomes your number 1 wide receiver. And we talked about this on the last podcast, Zach. It's a guy you had to get. Like that was a cycle-defining addition for you. You had to get him. You go ahead, you get it done. Kudos to Florida State for finishing that one off.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So that's one addition. Your offense, though, is getting revamped. It's getting bolstered. You've added more as well. One that was a little surprising, not surprising in that he wasn't on the radar at all, but we just didn't know what was going to happen with his recruitment, to be totally transparent. And that's tight end Randy Pittman. He went to UCF, was a 2-year contributor there, started full-time last season. He had like 700-something snaps, so played a ton of football. He visited Florida State. That was his first visit. And then he went to Arizona State. And we weren't sure what was going to happen after that. He went to TCU. He went to Virginia Tech. Lo and behold, Zach, he commits to Florida State. And that's another piece of the puzzle when you look at this Gus Malzahn offense. Seems to be a really good fit and a nice win for Florida State because you need that versatile H-back, and Randy Pittman presents that.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with Amari Williams getting, burn at the end, at least this spring. And I think that probably makes the most sense considering FSU's needs on their roster. The addition of Randy Pittman is huge. A guy that's, like you said, played a ton of football, has really solid production early on in his career and has 2 years left. I like this addition a lot. And I do have some insight into this recruitment. I was told that he let the FSU staff know on the visit that he was in, like he was coming to Florida State, but he took 3 other visits. So FSU was not like, you know, counting him in the class at that point, right? Like it's never a done deal when a guy tells you that he's, coming and then
And
goes
until that ink is dry at this point, and
yeah,
even
and then
then.
goes and visits 3 other spots. So I think it's they were kind of just waiting on to see like what would happen on those trips, and he finishes 3 other visits and decides to commit to Florida State kind of out of the blue, and it was, yeah, I mean, like I said, big addition and a guy that can really help them immediately on their offense at multiple in multiple different facets of what they'll try to do. And the reason I really like the addition as well is because of his familiarity with Gus Malzahn's offensive scheme. That's going to be, a transition for a lot of guys that are returning on this roster. Obviously, not a, complete different offense than what Mike Norvell ran. They're both of the same tree, but having someone who's been in the offense and been contributing in it for the past 2 seasons to kind of bring along the other guys on the roster towards what they're trying to accomplish is another plus here. And yeah, I mean, this is a guy that FSU was committed to FSU out of high school, so he knows
Like a year
yeah,
too.
he knows Chris Thompson, the tight ends coach, who was retained this offseason. Obviously knows head coach Mike Norvell. There's a lot of connections to this staff, so it made a ton of sense. Just didn't know if it was for sure going to happen, but they get it done, and yeah, another addition that I really like.
Yeah, he plays hard, man. I think that's the first thing that jumps out. Much like with Duce Robinson, someone who's a very willing blocker and doesn't have. It's funny. I think they both weigh around the same amount, but Randy Pittman's closer to like 6'1". So it's distributed a little differently. And obviously where he plays, it's super cool. Like, so another thing with Duce Robinson, he does play in the slot about a third of the time at USC, and he plays out wide, the other 2/3 of the time. But when he's in the slot, sometimes it's attached or close to being attached, like a nub wide receiver. So he's like the pseudo tight end. So malleable, versatile guy with that size. And Randy Pittman, similar in usage in that he's going to play a bunch of different positions. He's out wide. Sometimes he's going to be like an H-back, in the backfield at times. So he'll be an inline tight end sometimes. So he'll be a slot wide receiver. He's going to move all over the place because he has that athletic profile where he's fairly fluid, but he's a willing blocker. And I think that's my point. Now, sometimes the weight, he's able to throw it around, and sometimes he isn't. When he has to go one-on-one against a defensive end, there are times where he gets blown up, and that is a thing that shows up on film. But you also see someone who cares and is able to carve out space when he gets like one-on-one with a linebacker. And it's another, you start watching guys closely and watching them how they play away from the football. It seems like a concerted effort, Zach, that there is this intentionality of what Mike Norvell and the offensive staff are trying to bring in as guys who play with a lot of energy. And obviously now need that to the culture to take hold at Florida State. You need them to kind of override what happened this past season, but you're bringing guys in who are going to have an expectation of playing hard without the football, and that's kind of what Randy Pittman brings. And plus, he's pretty good with the football too, especially with the yak stuff. He had over 300 receiving yards. I think he had over 400 this past year. So he's a playmaker. Like, don't get me wrong, but he's someone who's going to be able to help mix and match and allow you to play with tempo because of how he plays without the football as well. So I really like this one as well. I don't think it's like a home run, but it's a solid like double. Like it's a guy who adds competency to a position that is really important in the Gus Malzahn offense. So another good addition. As I said, we're starting to get excited over what they're compiling on offense. They also go ahead and add 2 offensive linemen as well. For now, they might be about to add a third, but they go ahead and they add Gunnar Hansen, Vanderbilt left tackle and right tackle. He like interchange in between games. And I think we may have talked about him in the last podcast, but he's officially in the class now. And then you go ahead and get UCF starting left guard Adrian Medley as well. So those are 2 guys starting to experience at the Power 4 level. Obviously, one of them has a lot of experience in Herban's offense. Both good at inside zone blocking, Zach. Let's talk about those 2 additions and those recruitments.
Yeah, I mean, Gunnar Hansen was a guy that was courted by some pretty, big time programs. I think Oregon, Colorado, programs that are heavy spenders for offensive linemen in the portal. And FSU was able to get the South Florida native on campus early last week and close the deal soon after he finished his visit. They announced his signing officially on Monday. I know FSU fans were freaking out about that. I checked with Gunner late last week, and he had told me they was just kind of waiting on some paperwork to make it official that he was 100% going to Florida State. That obviously comes true. They announced his signing, like I said, this morning on Monday. And yeah, I mean, a guy that has a lot of experience and should be one of your starters at either, I think probably left tackle, but could, like you said, has played both. And I think he'll immediately help you on your starting O-line in 2025.
Yeah, both these guys are good run blockers. I think that's kind of what stands out. Yeah, Adrian Medley, like I'm fine with. It's kind of a lukewarm take. He's okay. He's solid. He's not going to have a bunch of like MAs, so that's kind of a floor raiser. But you need those, right? And he's someone who knows the system very well, so that's going to also be helpful. With Gunnar Hansen, his PFF stuff has never been like excellent. I think it's always been below average in the 55, maybe high 50 range. I don't think it's ever been great. But you watch him, how he blocks with inside zone, his ability to do down blocking and double teams. Like there's some stuff there that I think can help you with what you want your offense to be. And like we now zoom out, Zach, we look at this big picture of what you've started to assemble, and they're not done. But you're starting to see kind of the nucleus of what the offense is going to be. And how do you want to like just talk about big picture, what we kind of see from the offense right now?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they want to run the ball. I mean, that is Gus Malzahn's offensive MO. It's being able to run the ball and setting up chunk passing plays down the field. And I think just looking at their additions so far, it really fits that MO to a T. They added and prioritized run blocking specialists along the offensive line. Like you said, that at the tight end spot, they had Marcus and Douglas, who served 85% of the time as a blocker for Arizona State this past season. Obviously, it's kind of built like an extra offensive tackle who can move a little bit, and they add him back. Randy Pittman's a high effort guy who can help some in the blocking game, and obviously is a pass catching weapon as well. And then Duce Robinson as a big play wide receiver to really take advantage of teams that are trying to stop FSU's running game this upcoming season. So yeah, I mean, offensively, it seems like they're fully committed to building a personnel around Gus Malzahn's new scheme. And yeah, I mean, all the additions make sense towards their goal of being able to run the football efficiently this upcoming season.
So the guys who I think right now, yeah, let's just go over. So who they have right now, who we think will be starters or kind of in the start, let's say like in the high rotational range for them, and kind of see what we can deduce. I was going to make a Duce Robinson pun, but I stopped myself. If we can kind of deduce who else they're looking at, or what other positions that they would be trying to maybe bolster here come the second wave of the portal cycle, because visits will stop for the time being until January 1st, I believe. Thomas Castellanos, your starting quarterback. Usman Kroma, Cam Davis are probably your 1-2 punch running back, with then some of the Royda Williams, Keziah Holmes if he stays. I know he has an extra year of eligibility. Sam Singleton kind of in that mix rotationally. And then the more like athlete, probably slot wide receiver hybrid guys, Mekhi Dancing, Jalen Lucas. So that's your backfield, most likely. And then obviously Randy Pittman as the H-back. Your wide receivers, I have Duce Robinson as a surefire starter. After that, it gets a little dicey, Zach. LaWayne McCoy, Hakeem Williams, Elijah Moore, BJ Gibson are some names there that make sense to me. Javon Boggs might be kind of a wild card since he's a higher floor true freshman. Jaylen Brown is still here. So wide receiver, I think immediately I stop and say, you probably need a little more there. Is that a buy on a buy or Sonone scale?
Definitely buy. I think, they're operating like they're, still going to be in that market. Their final visitor of the entire December portal visit window was Traylon Ray, the West Virginia receiver transfer who's originally from Tallahassee. And yeah, they've hosted other receivers. It's pretty clear that they want to add more. I don't know if that happens until, maybe early January when they can start hosting guys again. But, I think it, just looking at the roster, and I think specifically like they've addressed the objective of trying to add size to that room.
Yeah.
I think now you got to go add, maybe a more, proven production guy at one of your other either slot or the two position, and trying to maybe prioritize speed.
Yeah. Speed, playmaking ability, someone, who can, uh, someone who can make plays with when they get the ball, whether it's vertically or yards after catch, but someone with a little twitch and juice to their game.
Yeah.
Tight end, Landon Thomas, Marcuston Douglas, Chase Lofton, Randy Pittman at H-back. I kind of feel like you need an extra body there still. That's but we'll see. You start getting low on numbers at a certain point too. The offensive line, Zach, is interesting. So Gunnar Hansen, Adrian Medley, probably penciled in as starters, right? Those are your additions. You bring them in to start.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's two. Then I think interior offensive line kind of falls with a mixture of Richie Leonard, Jacob Rizzi, and Jalen Early. And unless you get like an Andre Otto, John Daniels, or Lucas Simmons, like rapid ascension, I think you're still in the market for an offensive tackle. That brings us to Micah Pettis, the Ole Miss transfer. He visited Florida State. I have a crystal ball in for him. I had one in for Texas Tech in the posse. They went ahead and they filled their tackle need, which is probably good news for Florida State because Pettis has taken one visit and one visit only. It's been to Florida State. And I also have a crystal ball in for Florida State from 2020 when he was a high school recruit. So the long hold there. Do you want to do a show crystal ball, Zach?
Sure.
All right. I know you don't like to do the transfer crystal balls, but I think
I feel like they don't add to my percentage, do they?
They do. That's why it's easy. These layups. Now the question is, do I get credit for the 2021?
Highly doubt it.
I think we should discuss that with admin.
Yeah, take it up with the developers. I'm sure they'll. Yeah,
I will. But so if you add Micah Pettis, which I think you will at this point. That's not official, but I think you probably will. That is a 3-year starter in the SEC at right tackle. This past year was by far his best. I think he graded out like in 7.2 PFF range, which is above average. Really good in run game. I think he's a top 20 offensive tackle nationally, at least a power 4 for run blocking grade. I mean, he's massive. You see the photo that Chris put up of him walking in with Mike Norvell. It is extreme of two human beings size. Mike Norvell's probably a normal sized person, and Micah Pettis is not. What?
I said, are you calling Mike small?
He's probably my height, so yeah.
A source told me over the weekend that Pettis was the second best looking offensive line prospect that they've brought in like over the years, behind Mr. Amarius Mims.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, Amarius Mims, I think weight's distributed a little bit more the way you want, but like,
yeah, that's what.
Yeah, but what Pettis does, is move people, right? And there's some pancake blocks on this film that are fun, and that would be another determination of like what they want to do on offense. To your point of them wanting to run the football, like if they go ahead and add that guy, okay, that's 3 good run blockers that you've added in the transfer ranks. That's some beef you've added to the offensive line. And then all of a sudden you're talking about Gunnar Hansen, Adrian Medley, Richie Leonard, Jacob Rizzi, Jalen Early, in those, 3 roles for the inside role. And then I was going to say Micah Danzy. Definitely not Micah Pettis, size-wise, at right tackle. So like, yeah, you're starting to get juice and beef on the offensive line there. They also had 2 other transfers in this weekend from the offensive line as well. Zach, you want to talk about those guys real quick? I don't know if either of them end up coming here, but it's telling to me that Florida State's not done recruiting the offensive line. Like they are looking to still get value there if possible.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. Just what FSU does, if they do end up adding Pettis, just because what we know of the offensive line market, you're not nickel and diming that market. It is super expensive to just land guys that are considered capable. And Micah Pettis is, like you said, one of the better run blockers in the country. along the offensive line, and I think he'll be compensated like that. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting to me. But it's seems like they're still in the market to add more bodies to that room. And the two guys that they hosted this weekend, aside from Pettis along the offensive line, Ethan Onyanwa, who was at he's from Rice.
Rice.
Yeah.
Is that Rice?
He was at Rice and was their left tackle, and he has a legit market. I mean, he's been at Iowa, Ohio State, Texas A&M, and has heard from a number of other schools. And yeah, I mean, good looking prospect. I think he's listed 6'6", 345. A guy that FSU got the last visit for. So that's always, noteworthy. And then the other one, Ratrell Perry, who is a FCS offensive tackle transfer from Central Connecticut State.
That's where my dad went. CCon.
Boom.
That's what the real ones call it.
6'5", 305 pound offensive tackle, who's also being prioritized by some big time programs. Maryland, Ohio State, Pitt, and Syracuse all are in the mix. And interesting that Ohio State's they have a big need on the offensive line, and they're in on both of these prospects. So it's probably a good sign as to their talent level and what these schools think that they can, especially for a guy like Perry, who would be moving up to the FBS level. Probably means he's pretty talented and is dominating his competition. So yeah, I mean, he played 900 snaps at left tackle, and these are guys that are both tackle prospects. So it seems like that's kind of the focus for Florida State is adding more quality to their offensive tackle room and guys that they can depend upon in a rotation this upcoming season.
So that's the offense right now, and clear you still have some holes to fill, but we're starting to get a semblance of what it can be, what it looks like, what the intent is, very clear. So we'll see. We'll see what that ends up looking like, the final as the dust settles. I know it's not a great take to say we'll see, but I do appreciate that we have a semblance of what they are intending to do. Now, they also made that intent last year, and we saw how that worked out. But this is obviously a different staff on offense, a different approach to running the football. I think that's the big takeaway is you want to be a really good running team based on the players you're adding at the skill positions, based on what those guys do when the ball's not in their hand, based on the beef you're adding the offensive line, and most important, I think, the quarterback that you added, right, and his running ability. So now we see what the finishing touches are on offense. Defensively, also taking shape as well, hasn't been quite as many movements. We did the podcast since they've added Deontay McCray, correct?
I don't remember.
I think we did. Anyways, let's real quick. If not, Western Kentucky defensive end Deontay McCray committed to Florida State, a guy that we liked in the transfer portal, Jacksonville native, multi-year starter at Western Kentucky, big, 6'4", 284. Seems like he still has the frame to kind of keep growing as he's entering year 4 of his college career, and he's going to go to a Power 4 program. Probably add a little bit more bulk to him, but he plays in the 3-man front, capable of playing like a 3-tech when you go to 3-tech, when you go to a 4-man front, can play directly over the tackle as well if needed. Very good in the run game. I think he had 25 run stops this past year. So a guy who plays hard. We saw him blocking we talked about this on the podcast. Saw him blocking a field goal in a bowl game, even when he was in the transfer portal. So I like that. It was a good addition, high energy guy. Another guy who plays really hard. Like you see that on film, it shows up.
I think we talked about him visiting, but not committing.
Oh, okay. Well, he's visited. He's committed. He adds to your defensive line. So that's James Williams that you've added. You've added Deontay McCray, and you obviously retained Darrell Jackson. In addition to Amari Williams going to be playing some defensive end for you this year. Daniel Lyons and KJ Sampson, I believe you're retaining as well at this point. KJ Sampson, I'm pretty confident is done deal. I don't know about Daniel Lyons, but you have a few days left in the transfer portal, and he's still here. So that's kind of your defensive line right now. I don't know if you need to add more. I think you probably do. Just not sure what the market bears at this moment. And then linebacker, you have Omar Graham, Juice Cryer. You're going to retain Blake Nicholson. Then you add Stephon Thompson as well. It's another position where I think you can add some depth, maybe get a young player who has some developmental traits in the transfer portal. We know they hosted Bowles kid. What's his first name?
Troy Bowles
Troy
from
Bowles. So Todd Bowles' son. He ends up going to Michigan. I was okay with that. I didn't love his film, but that would be someone that has an athletic profile and upside. So someone in that realm, you're probably still in the market for. Thoughts on defensive front and kind of how that's coming together, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like the two additions at end, and obviously like the their ability to retain Daryl Jackson. It does feel like they need more bodies, especially at the end position, just because you don't have a ton of guys with. I mean, you basically lost your entire two deep
Mhm.
from this past season, and Pat Payton ends up at LSU. Sounds like Marvin Jones is still in the portal. Not sure what the deal is there, but yeah, I mean I do think you need to add at least one more defensive end.
Pass rusher type.
Yeah, I think so, and obviously it's a different front just from a us projecting it out standpoint because a lot of these guys that we had considered D tackles before might be able to play along those end spots in a three-man front. So it's not like like a guy like Daniel Lyons like could play like if he's retained like could play at one of those end spots like that's something to monitor. But I do think regardless they need another body in that room,
Yeah,
especially on the at the edge position.
I mean, right now the pass rusher, the speed rushers, I should say, like are James Williams, Amari Williams, and like we know James Williams is really good at getting the quarterback, but that's like his specialty right now, which is it's a good fastball to have, but like he's also going to be asked to take on a bigger role as an every down player, and so who knows what that's going to look like. Like, does he have the same stamina like when he's not having to just come on the field on third down? You know what I mean? So like that's you need more depth to add to have a variety of bodies and pass rushers to get to the quarterback. Amari Williams is a total wild card. He's athletic. He belongs at this level from an athletic standpoint, but he played tight end last year, so he's making a transition, to a new position. Then after that, man, it's like Aaron Hester, um, D.D. Holmes is like a big DN. Jaden Jones coming off of a injury. Like, yeah, you need twitched up athletic guys. I think to kind of yeah, you need more in that room. I'm with you. Um, Even linebacker, I think you need more athleticism there too. Like, go ahead and retain who you've retained. Like those guys all showed promise, but um, yeah, if your intent is to compete for a playoff spot, which I know sounds crazy coming off the 2-win season, but I think that is the intent of like the roster you're building. Probably would credit to FSU. Like they must be finding money in the ledger somewhere or doing something. So what they've done and some of the additions they've made, like these are inexpensive acquisitions. So they've, I know it's been a big talking point for us in the podcast. They're making big splashes right now. I think you still have to continue to do that on defense. Secondary too, man. Like I think that Tony White talked about that he really liked the athleticism that he's seen on film from the secondary. There doesn't seem to be a huge push to add anyone really in the secondary right now. Like if they brought in any defensive back, have they offered any DB transfers at all, other than the UCF kid who was kind of a like a lukewarm offer and then never really showed up? Anyone?
I don't know that they have. I think they've put out feelers to a few, but I mean, like I heard that the kid from UCF who was a true freshman this past season got a ton of money from SMU. That's where he ended up. Originally was at US, committed to USC, and flipped to SMU. So yeah, I mean that they feel good about the young pieces in that room, but I do think I've heard that they will be open to taking one, whether that's that corner or safety. Um, a guy that can run, and I think adding someone with experience is would be big there, just because I mean, like I said, you're losing your top two corners, and it just feels like they need some experience in that room for they like I said, they feel good about the young pieces, but not a lot of guys with experience, and especially at the corner spot, that feels like a spot that would benefit from some leadership, some veteran ability, to kind of infused into that position group.
Yeah, I will say I do think Shaheem Brown returns. I think that's very likely at this point. He's probably a rover. like if you get the good version of Shaheem, like that's an NFL caliber prospect. If you get the guy who is kind of half in, half out at times this season, then there's a bit of a roll of the dice there. But that is a guy with, from a talent perspective, like yeah, that's there. We have to see what his buy-in is and what his fit is, but it kind of fits like the Rover, downhill safety mold. So we'll see. But your other safety spot, like who plays there? Do you move a corner? We got KJ Kirkland or Little, Conrad Hussey penciled in right now. And then, the hybrid spot, like is that Edwin? Is it Ricky Knight? Yeah, so that'll be fun to see in the spring, right? That'll be interesting to see kind of what the pieces they put together are and who they believe in and whatnot. But I'm with you, Zach. I think one more veteran there. But like all these names that we've kind of thrown out there, and including some of the walk-ons too. Remember, it's a 105-man limit at this point. I'm up to 98 as what I have projected right now. That's with no one else exiting. That's not with Micah Pettis in the class. So that be if you add him 99. So you're getting pretty close to it. That's not to say guys can't transfer out after the spring. But we've seen before that's not always what happens. And there's frankly been fewer transfers out this cycle than we'd have expected. So you're going to have to be judicious, I guess, with what you're adding. But anyways, that's kind of what the roster's starting to kind of take shape a little bit. The portal efforts have been solid. If I was at a like C+ grade, last time, thought it was like above average, but nothing spectacular. But we were trying to kind of project for who they might be adding without counting them totally, in my mind. Now I'd say it's probably like a B to B+. I feel like it's starting to kind of come together. What grade would you give it? Because we know we like to give out incomplete grades. Let's go ahead and do that for fun.
Yeah, we're experts at that. No, I'd give it a B. I don't think you added, aside from Duce Robinson, I don't think you added any like real like stars to this roster. But I think this is the realm of guys that I thought FSU would be in on, and I think they did a good job hitting on, the ones they wanted, and especially like along the O line. If you're able to add Pettis, like I like that haul a good amount, and hopefully they're not done there. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely gotten better over the last like week. But I think it's fair for us to like judge it when the dust settles, whether that's better or worse than what we view it right now. And I think a week ago, like it was fair to say like, hey, like they were targeting these guys and they didn't land guys that they wanted, and nothing that was like make or break for this upcoming season. But yeah, I mean, I like what they've done the past few days. These additions they've made, I feel like they're all majority of these guys are going to help you win games this upcoming year, and that's the most important thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm at a B right now.
All right, it's a B for both of us. All right, I think that's everything, man. All right, we good? Anything else?
I think we're good.
All right. So as we get out of here, want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, safe travels if you're still traveling. If you're with family, God bless. Good luck with that right now. Hopefully it's not too dramatic, just the right amount. Remember, go to Chattanooga Whiskey, buy a bottle, and that'll help get through the holiday season a little bit better. But in all seriousness, thank everyone for listening, for watching, for supporting. It's been a crazy year, a hell of a year, but thank you. Seriously, your patronage is expected. Oh, Freudian slip there. What's the word I was looking for, Zach?
Appreciated.
For Zach Blossing, I'm Brendan Sinone. This has been On the Bench, sticking the landing.